I'm going to turn this now over as we get started to our favorite anchor, reporter at Channel 7, Dion.
What an introduction, John. Thank you so much. How's everybody feeling? I think it's a great sunny day to celebrate something historic and something that we can remember and pass on to generations to come. So before I get started, the most important announcement I was told from John to pass along to everyone is that he wanted me to let everyone know that the restrooms are over to that direction. So by all means, don't be bashful, get up, go whenever you need. So for all of you who don't know, my name is Dion Lim. I'm a news anchor and reporter at ABC7 KGO-TV, which is just down the street from where we are today, this beautiful and historical headquarters of the Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association. Even if you take a look around, every time I come into this building, I think to myself, my goodness, the history. I need to learn a little bit more about the people who built this and the work that takes place within these four walls. So just so you know a little bit about me and why today is significant for me, is that I did not grow up in San Francisco. I was not born in San Francisco. However, I am the daughter of immigrants from Taiwan and Hong Kong. And even for them, when they came to America in the 1960s, and they grew up in places like Texas and Michigan, and places where they truly did not belong, and I was a child trying to grapple in my very white neighborhoods, the meaning and the significance of that, and how they were attacked with xenophobia, racism, hate, and sometimes physical violence. Little did I know that that one day would play into what I do for a living, telling the stories of Asian Americans, particularly those in the Chinese American community that feel underrepresented, unheard, unseen, and being able to elevate their stories. So for that, I am always so honored and grateful that people will open up their lives in the time of adversity and allow me to share their story. Because collectively, when we learn about our history, when we learn about what is happening in our daily lives and our communities around us, then we can make change. And that is why I think all of us are here today. So thank you for having me. Before we get started, I'm smiling in this direction because we actually have two very significant members of our audience, ones that I promised I would not call out to come out and speak, but Sandra and Norman Wong, direct descendants of Wong Kim Ark, are in our audience today. Please a round of applause. Thank you. I'm glad you stood up. And I just heard from a little birdie that, Norman, you are a Lowell High School graduate. I will spare you, I promise. You know, I'm so delighted to welcome all of you here today, because what we are doing is we are celebrating the boldness of Chinese Americans, dating all the way back to the 1800s. It's always baffled my mind when I hear that people in our community want to stay silent because they're ashamed or afraid. But think about this, hundreds of years ago, we had that courage right in San Francisco. Now, because of Wong Kim Ark and this group taking their case to the U.S. Supreme Court, children who are born in the United States, regardless of their immigration status, are U.S. citizens. Think about the magnitude, the gravity of that, not only in our community in the Bay Area, but across the country. We do want to recognize today's event being made possible by our community members, our legal organizations, and everyone here today who believes in elevating history. Because by knowing it, we become empowered. We carry the determination of those who came before us in order to make change. That includes Chinese American immigrants, the first native-born citizens like Wong Kim Ark. Today we are hearing from civic and community leaders alike and history experts to tell the story. And at noon I will be turning over the microphone because after all I do have to go do the newscast in a few hours. I'll be turning the microphone over to Professor Ming-Soo Chen, who directs the Center for Race, Immigration, Citizenship and Equality, also known as the Rice Center, you'll never forget that name, at UC Law San Francisco. He'll be moderating our law panel, and that'll allow me to get to the newscast and see you on TV, because back there, we are covering for our news, because I believe that if we can bring this to other parts of the Bay Area as well, that's the whole point of us having these events today. So to properly welcome us to this beautiful building and to our events today, let's welcome past president of the CCBA, Kelvin C., also past president and continuing San Francisco civic leader, Mel Lee, offering remarks. Please welcome them.
Thank you so much, our favorite newscaster, Dion. Thank you so much. Actually, this is the first time I've seen so many new faces here, literally. So tell me one thing. Is that the first time being here? Raise your hands, first time you've been to the city. Wow, look at that. Thank you so much. Just for information only. CCBA, also known as Chinese Six Company. In California alone, we have at least half a dozen different cities, including Sacramento, Stockton, California, Los Angeles, Oakland, Fresno, Salinas, Eastern Field. Not to name those are the different states: New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Chicago, Washington, D.C. So you have an array of information strictly under the name of Chinese Six Company. Why we're here today is quite significant. The significance because of one person, Wong Kim Ark. You go back to history, the U.S. Constitution, under the 14th Amendment, you're born here, you should be a U.S. citizen. But because of that area, that many years ago, Wong Kim Ark had the audacity and the legal support of this association, Six Company, provided legal support for Wong Kim Ark to file a lawsuit against the U.S. Constitution. And fortunately, he prevailed. Prevail is not the only thing. However, of the 9 justices, 6 voted for Wong Kim Ark, 2 against, 1 abstained. Any high school, any middle school, you read the U.S. history, civic duties, you can read 14th Amendment is spelled out. But at that time, discrimination. Today, we still continue so. This is why we're here, and thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
I'm so glad you provided some of that context. It's always nice to learn a little bit of history, because so oftentimes in school, we don't learn this. This is not part of our curriculum. Please come to the stage. We'd like to have you say a few words.
Good morning. My name is Kelvin C., and I'm the president of CCBA for 2003 and 2004. Today is a very special day because we heard a lot about this case about Wong Kim Ark versus the U.S. government. My personal impression of this thing is that Wong Kim Ark case actually served a poignant reminder of the struggle that the Chinese immigrant have to face throughout the nation's history. And the ongoing battle that's going on right now, even today, that they're fighting for the birthright citizenship. The principle that's established by Wong Kim Ark actually help us to rethink that the past discrimination against the Asian community, but now even expand to the other minority. I think we still face the challenge of all this thing going on. The decision actually helped us to rethink that in the in the future that we have to get together to acknowledge all the challenge of the immigrant and the family that face in America, and then we need to advocate for them to have the right for the immigrant and work towards to helping them be more equitable and a just society. At the end, I think that this case, the Wong Kim Ark case, actually helped us to lay the foundation for future Americans to uphold this ideal that the principle of the equal right and the opportunity for everyone. That's all I can say. Thank you.
So well said, Kelvin and Mel. Thank you so much for those words. Now, moving on with our program, our next speaker is Doug Chan. In addition to so many years practicing law, serving our city boards and on commissions, Doug is now president of the board of directors for the Chinese Historical Society of America. CHSA, for all of you who don't know, is a museum at 965 Clay Street. In addition to the organization, they are co-hosting today's festivities. And just so you can put this into perspective, about 2 words, small and mighty. There were only 250,000 Chinese Americans back in 1963, which is hard for me to believe. You look at the population of San Francisco today. But ever since then, this group has collected and preserved and also illuminated and championed the history. They are the center for research, the center of scholarship for Chinese Americans as well. So without further ado, please welcome Doug Chan.
Good day. Tagaho. Assemblyman Ting, Supervisor Engardio, City Attorney David Chu, I think it's on here. Honored guests, friends, it's a pleasure to be speaking with you here today and just share a few thoughts briefly. For my family, the story of Wong Kim Ark is personal. My great-grandfather was born here in 1867. My grandmother was born at number 12 Washington Place, now known as Wentworth Valley, in 1898. This case had a telling material impact on the destinies and lives of real people who live in this community and whose descendants live all over the Bay Area now. Today we celebrate Wong Kim Ark, Wong Kim Ark, and the people who made possible his battle all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court for this community. This 125-year-old story matters today because many believe that the civil rights era started in the 1960s, that Chinese Americans in this community were merely bit players or latecomers to the struggles, even worse, that we don't belong. That sincere but incorrect belief misleads some of our fellow Americans to insist that Chinese Americans should take a back seat to others and we keep silent about our needs and our interests. We can only move forward by spreading the knowledge and understanding of what legal historian Charles McLean, from whom you will hear later today, described as the tortuous path, the elusive goal towards American citizenship in that time and in this place. As Frederick Douglass said, education is the key to freedom. Today, you will hear about not only Wong Kim Ark's story, but also about Mamie Tate and her family, and the Yikwo Lund and other members of this community, and a panel of legal scholars have given generously of their time to bring you this teachable moment. At CHSA, we encourage all of you to honor the past, to inform the present, and in these times, secure the future of our civil rights, of our community and all Americans. The message that is fundamental to the Wong Kim Ark decision is, in 3 words, we belong here. We belong here. Think about that. But more importantly, go out there and tell the world, this is where we began, and this is where we will begin again. Thank you. would like to, in the interest of Chinese media, to bring on our Chief Operations Officer who will address you in okay.
各位來賓好，早晨，我係 Elvina Chow 周以婷，美國華人史學會首席運營官。今日我哋慶祝黃金德同埋多年嘅義士喺1890年代為佢哋嘅社區一直打官司，打到去美國最高法院。呢段歷史係今日嚟講係好重要，因為有好多人以為民權運動係1960年代開始。 再加上以為美籍華人同埋我哋呢個社區對爭取民權冇扮演到重要嘅角色，又或者太遲起步。呢一個真誠但係錯誤嘅信念，導致有部分美國同胞堅持美籍華人應該退居二線，並且覺得佢哋嘅需求同埋利益都會保持沉默。我哋可以邁步向前，唯一途徑就係此時此地傳播知識。 同了解我哋當年喺125年前發生嘅歷史，正如 Frederick Douglass 所說，教育就係自由嘅關係。今日你哋唔單止可以聽到有關黃金德嘅事蹟，仲可以聽到益和洗衣店老闆一家人，包括 Mamie Tate 嘅經歷。嚟自呢個社區嘅成員同埋一班嚟自法律界學者嘅分享添。我哋美國華人歷史學會竭力鼓勵大家。 尊重過去，告知現在，藉此確保我哋嘅社區同埋美國同胞未來嘅公民權利。多謝大家 ，Thank you so much。
Because 我不能講廣東話，謝謝你。Thank you, Doug, and thank you to our translator for providing those words. I think you hit it on the head, is that sense of belonging is what we are still all looking for in our communities today. Now, you heard a little bit about this earlier in the program, but the Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association is actually known more commonly, easier to remember perhaps, as the Six Companies, and that is because of the family associations that it is comprised of. For those who are not so familiar, this group dates back to the early immigrants from China in the late 1840s and was formally established in 1882. That is the same year as the Chinese Exclusion Act. They fiercely protected rights of Chinese in San Francisco and across the country. Harrison Lim is CCBA's former presiding president and founder of the Charity Cultural Services Center to support newcomers to San Francisco and America. He joins us now to tell us more about the role this organization took on during the violence, during the political activities targeting the Chinese in San Francisco in the 1800s. And this also includes ordinances passed by the Board of Supervisors and the legislature, and perhaps a little about this beautiful building that we happened to be in this morning. So without any delay, let's take it over to Harrison.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Harrison Lim. Let me tell you, before I come to here, my wife, my children worry because although I'm not too old, but not old enough. Just only 87. That's why I cannot stand here for too long. Forgive me. Let me sit here, okay? This article led me nervous for a few days because my accent, my pronunciation is lousy. Let me tell you some. My daughter write for me. I came to the United States in my late 30s and did not have a chance to learn English. Please accept me. Okay. Let me start the story. Actually, all of you maybe know already. Okay. But it's my duty. I still have to do something, okay? I changed my class. Sorry. History Rec Committee member Harrison Lim, on a certain days in the autumn of 1870, some material said, it's 1871, okay. A woman with bound feet gave a birth to a child in San Francisco, Chinatown, USA. The parents of the child were both Chinese. According to the data, there were 518 children in Chinese descent born in the United States in 1870. But each of their future prospects has his own natural. This young life, Wong Kim Ark, was waiting to be shaped by faith. In the era, American society was full of suspense. In 1894, Wong Kim Ark was 24 years old. Was it time for him to go back in his hometown in the Far East to visit relatives and get married? For many generations, Chinese fathers and sons have chosen this as the ideal and feasible path for Chinese Americans living in the United States. Under the arrangement of faith and the expectation of his relatives, Wong Kim Ark returned to his ancestral homeland. He has stayed in his father's old ancestral house for 3 months. In July, when the golden wind blew, he was full of joy and wished to return to the land of gold. But unfortunately, Mr. Wong was denied entrance upon his return to USA. He was terrified. His fond mother, Lee, was confused and haggard. She was so sad that it was like the tide of the river beating against the shore and the flood into her chest. But the autumn season of that year had come and gone. But there was still no way to go back to USA. His father, Wong Kim, was speechless and helpless. In that uncivilized area, U.S. Customs was like a gate to help for the ethnic minorities. This checkpoint was not frozen with snow, but with the evil Chinese Exclusion Act passed in 1882, which took the soul of the Chinese. The leader of the Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association, the CCBA. The leader of the CCBA, founded around 1850, was deeply grieved after they learned that Wong had been denied entry. So they stood up in the case of
in justice, they call upon a gatherer, overseas compatriot with the long run of donation. Then they also launched the fundraising campaign, High Attorney sued the U.S. government and upheld justice for our disadvantaged ethnic group. As a result, there were numerous layers of checkpoints. Since the plaintiff was weak, they were greatly outpressed by the official and suffer from repeat setbacks. After being imprisoned on a boat for 5 months, Wong Kim Ark was released on bail and came ashore. He then joined his lawyer and strived hard for justice. Although the case was repeatedly defeated after endless trials, the CCBA sages decided to take the case to the Supreme Court in the United States. On March 28, 1898, after repeated arguments by both plaintiff lawyers and defendants, government lawyers, the result of the vote by the 9th Justice of the United States Supreme Court was 7-2. The plaintiff and CCBA side won the case. Justice Hollis, Gary, announcing justification on the behalf of the Supreme Court said, and calling to the 14th Amendment to the United Constitution, any person born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction, therefore, is the citizen of the United States and the states wherein they reside. In accordance with this clause, all persons born in the United States, regardless of their ethnicity or color, automatically become citizens of the United States. Since Justice Hollis Gray announced the adjudication, United States, we, Wong Kim Ark, birthright citizens case, has come a landmark constitutional case in the United States, which has far-reaching implications and benefits the world's disadvantaged ethnic groups who were born in the United States. Hence, Wong Kim Ark can return to the United States, embrace and pursue the colorful American dream. It's my breath over his mother's soft skin face. American official and public might wonder. The CCBA and the Wong Kim Ark family are not related nor blood related to each other. Why is the association supporting the Wong Kim Ark family in their struggling to fight against the government for civil rights. The CCBA finally won the lawsuit. But what benefit did Wong and his family bring to CCBA? Nothing. During the period of litigation in this case, the United States has been in nation for more than 100 years. The American people might not know that there is a splendid culture of the Chinese nation in the East. The descendants of Chinese nation who are usually will rule the country with benevolent, justice, kindness, and fairness. This has been the cultural backbone of the Chinese nation for 5,000 years. The sages of the CCBA were deeply influenced by the nurturing of the national culture of Confucianism. Harmony between and the nature. The passion they brought that run in their lives and the benevolence and righteousness that emerge in their mind are the effect of 5,000 years of Chinese culture that have been derived from the same origin that year. The member of the CCBA worked hard to set for the standard of justice and lift Wong Kim Ark out of the difficulties. This aim to demonstrate in original intents of the establishment of CCBA, serving overseas in patriot, unconditionally defend the welfare of Chinese community, and practicing and carrying forward the great ambition of Chinese culture. Since its founding about 170 years ago, the association has made great contribution to all aspects of Chinese community and our society in general in the United States, including more than 10,000 lawsuits for justice, disaster relief assistance, and distributing aid to the needy. The annals of winning case are endless. The association's members hand down the mission and carry on the responsibility from generation to generation. With the image of the association in the heart of Chinese community, it majestic and shining aura won the respect of both Chinese and foreign people. The CCBA, which will help them achieve their spirit aspirations. And this means that recently some politicians came to our organization, asked for help. We support them. Okay. Recently, there has been a foresight group of leaders in our organization who initiated the CCBA Historical Relics Committee to specialize in organized sick flow and protect the historical relics archives. Mr. Ting Lee, head of the historic relics group, Thomas Ng, Mel Lee, Harrison Lim, Irene Kwok, Presiding President Lee, Peter Wong, Jason Kwok, Robert Ting, and other presidents members have joined the relics group to request the government release a non-profit tax exemption license, or known as 501c3 permit. All income with the 501c3 permit in hand, it is conducive to diversity of development of service to that Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association can move forward with. Members of the Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association hereby sincerely wish all overseas compatriots in the United States and all Americans have a better tomorrow. Thank you. 谢谢你们体谅，我差不多40岁才移民来美国，什么都不懂，不然我们董事会台局啊，说我很老了，给我个机会，那边很好，感谢啊。那么中文我不念了，因为大家都懂英文了，英文好很多，谢谢。我现在很高兴什么呢？我们 Channel 7一个很美丽的这个工作人员，也是林小姐，跟我的last name同意啊，可能是台山人了，我是台山人，谢谢啊，谢谢大家鼓掌，谢谢。
谢谢 Harrison， 你的英文非常不好，不好。I told you my Chinese is not very good. I appreciate your time. Thank you all so much for listening and paying attention. Your English truly is quite good. I'm so glad to have you on our panel today. I'm so used to saying that about myself. All right, so moving on now with our program. Our next speaker, David Lay, I am interested in hearing from because I actually drive through Chinatown every day on my way to ABC7 Studios. He has an encyclopedic knowledge and also an appreciation for the settlement and history of San Francisco's Chinatown. He's been a youth counselor, he's been a volunteer in many positions in community organizations. He actually gives tours of Chinatown as well, and he's also assisted in a number of museum exhibitions to present these stories. So from the back alleys to now on front of all of you to tell the story of Wong Kim Ark, welcome David Lay.
Guests and friends, most are my friends here, and I don't think most of you have seen me in the suit. I've been retired for 20 years, but today is a special occasion to honor this case, this 125 years old law case, this venerable institution And for me to honor my father, I would tell you the story, I would like to tell you the story of how my family came here. In 1949, when the communists took over China, my family moved to Taiwan, where I was born. And they immediately applied to come to America because my father had a sister that lived here that was a citizen. But the quota for Chinese to come to America in 1956 was 105 Chinese a year, basically zero. So it took 7 years. I came when I was 7. My father's first job here was to be a janitor at the Partner Set apartment near San Francisco State. And we struggled in our early years. And about 4 years ago, Mel Lee, Ting Lee, and Harrison, Robert, and Thomas Ng, the board here allowed me to look at the archives. And I found my father was the president of the CCBA in 1961. A little more than 4 years after coming to America, being a janitor, very poor at the time, to be head of this association. And you have to ask why. And you have to ask, how can a cook, Wong Kim Ark, at that time, take this case to the Supreme Court? So you have to look at the background. We think of Chinese, the early immigrants, as being laundry workers, cooks. But you know, the Chinese men never did laundry in China. And most of them were not chefs or cooks in China. These were the opportunities open to the Chinese here. My father always had servants growing up, always had chauffeurs. His father was a banker and owned a chain of pharmacy that sold Western medicine, not Chinese medicine. And he graduated from an American Presbyterian University in Guangzhou. Coming here, he spoke English. He spoke Mandarin, Cantonese, and Taishanese. But he was willing to be a janitor for opportunities and for the families. So this is what the community was about, to help each other, to protect each other. So right now, we'd like to talk more than just the Wong Kim Ark case, what the Chinese have done in terms of civil rights and immigrant rights. Tate versus Hurley, that was mentioned before. This is right to a public education in 1885. After that, we have Yikwall versus Hopkins, a laundry case that reinterpreted equal protection under the law to also mean the execution and the administration of the law has to be equal. Not just it has to be written equal, but the administration and execution. This was very important. Then the Chinese are actually the most litigious and the most civil disobedient group of people America has ever seen. Between 1882, when the Exclusion Act came about, and 1905, the Chinese brought more than 10,000 cases against the US government. I'm not talking about the state government, municipal government, county government, just the federal government, more than 10,000 times. About 9% of the Chinese America sued. And we were also very disobedient. When the Gary Act came about in 1892, where all Chinese were required to carry an internal passport, a picture ID, showing that they were legal residents. And the Chinese, this organization said, in America, only dogs have to keep a license with them, and only criminals need to register with the state. And we Chinese are not dogs. and we're not criminals, so we're not going to do it. So this is the largest instance of civil disobedience this country has ever seen. About 100,000 Chinese, 97% of the Chinese in America refused to register because of this organization. And this organization sued the US government, but they lost. So in 1894, the Chinese registered. But that's civil disobedience. Then I can continue with other law cases. Of course, Wong Kim Ark, birthright citizenship. Then we have political asylum. You know, during, when we withdrew from Afghanistan, we left a lot of friends there. And we talked about political asylum, that these people should have political asylum. But where did this concept come from? It came from the Chinese, the Persian Chinese. In 1916, General Pershing was sent to Mexico to capture Pancho Villa. And the US military hired a lot of Chinese, 1,000 of them, to feed the troops, to build tents for the troops, to do the laundry. But when Pershing failed to capture Pancho Villa, he was called back to go to Europe to fight World War I. All the Americans that helped the troops and all the Mexicans that helped the troops, when they came back across the border to the US, they were let in. But the 700 Chinese that were there, immigration said, no, you cannot come in. To Pershing's credit, he says, no, these people helped us, these Chinese helped us, and we were to leave them, they'll be massacred. So he pushed his way through, but now these Chinese that were in America, they became illegal aliens. And they have to stay at Fort Sam Houston. So Pershing went to fight World War I, won, came back as a hero. And he found out the Chinese were still stuck at Fort Sam Houston, so he went to Congress to pass Public Law 29 in 1921. First time this country passed any law to allow for political asylum. And here's the proof. A 1917 trophy that this organization was going to present to Pershing, but he went to Europe already, so it's still here. This is physical evidence that this happened here. But more than that, you've heard of about the Miranda Act, that the accused have a right to remain silent, to have a lawyer. This was really based on the Chinese case. 1966, when it went to Supreme Court, the Miranda case, the Supreme Court says, no, we don't have to judge this again. We judged this in 1924 in a Chinese murder case. But it was in DC. But the Supreme Court says you cannot torture someone, cannot deny him of a lawyer. So that case was overturned, and the Chinese won. So in 1966, they said, we already decided this in DC, but DC is a special district, did not apply to the rest of the country. So Miranda Act is based on this Chinese Act. Then as recently as 1974, this community pushed and sued the Board of Education to bring bilingual education in Lough versus Naples. So I'm so happy I get to share with you these stories that we Chinese are the most litigious and the most civil disobedient group. And my father would be very happy that I can share this with you and that I can tell my children and my grandchildren about this. Thank you.
David, you and Harrison combined, I have learned more in those 15 minutes than I did in my entire college education when it came to Chinese American history. So thank you very much for those words. I want to remind everyone that Kim Wong Ark's story is not just a Chinese one. It is an inherently American one. It is a story that defined our US constitutional guarantee to birthright citizenship. And immigrant rights, I think, are oftentimes seen as a civil rights matter, but truly the issues, they involve so much and they are so reflective of our international relations. So it is very appropriate for me now to introduce someone with some brief words, Ms. Zhou Young Hong, China's Deputy Consulate General in San Francisco.
Dear guests and friends, today is an important day for all of us gathering here to commemorate the 125th anniversary of the lawsuit, United States versus Wong Kim Ark. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled in favor of Wong on March the 28th, 1898. There is no denying that the victory of the lawsuit was such a great milestone which marks the awareness of the Chinese Americans to pursue and safeguard their legitimate rights, and also have been encouraging the following generations to do so. Since more than 100 years ago, from California gold miners to railway workers, from local small business owners to IT technicians in Silicon Valley, from community volunteers to local elected officials, the Chinese Americans contributed to the social and economic development of the U.S. and become an integral component of American society. However, what they were facing were the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 and the Asian hate now. It is not fair and seriously hurts the Chinese and Asian American people. We all know that Asian hate is completely unacceptable and history should not repeat again. Learning from the very history, we hope the Chinese and Asian community could be united to fight against discrimination. We must work together to condemn all acts of violence and discrimination, and make it clear that such behavior will not be tolerated. United we stand, divided we fall. Now we can see a new generation of Asian American activists and allies have come to the forefront, demanding justice and equality for all. Learning from the very history, we hope the esteemed organizations play more and more important roles in this new era. Over 125 years ago, without the unconditional support of CCBA and other local organizations and American friends, Wong Kim Ark may not win the historical lawsuit. The success was not only belongs to him, but also to the CCBA and American people. It is also welcomed that the CCBA and all relevant organizations work together and make collective efforts to address challenges in this time and enhance the benefit of the local Chinese community. Learning from the very history, we hope the Sino-US relations a better future. Certain politicians in this country started to spread political viruses, attempting to vilify and discredit China, contain and suppress China's development. This has not only undermined the interests of the U.S. itself and China-U.S. relations, but also lead to the emergence of the problems of Asian hate, bringing challenges to Chinese and others in the United States. We hope the US side work with China to put into real actions on the consensus reached by President Xi Jinping and President Biden, bringing back the US-China relations to the right track of steady and sound development, and enhance the well-being of both countries and peoples. We also hope Chinese Americans could leverage your respect strengths and be a helpful bridge by sharing stories about China and the cooperations between China and the United States. Engaging in more people-to-people exchanges and cooperations, thus promoting the improvement and growth of China-US relations. Thank you all.
I so appreciate those words. Thank you so much for sharing them with everyone today. Up next, we are joined by 3 civic leaders, ones that I have worked with in the past, ones that have spoken out against the discrimination and the hate that we have seen play out in not only America, but in our communities all around the Bay Area. And the first speaker I'd like to introduce is someone I saw actually at the White House. We have a selfie together with President Biden at the Asian American History Month celebration in the Rose Garden from last year. Assembly member Ting. Now, keep in mind, because of term limits laws, he is completing his service in the legislature next year after many years in the Assembly and after serving on the Board of Supervisors as our city and county assessor. You know him well. Please welcome Assembly member Ting.
Thank you, Dion. Really appreciate you being here today. And it's just a huge honor for me to be with the Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association and the Chinese Historical Society celebrating the 125th anniversary of the Wong Kim Ark case. Something just amazingly historic, really enshrining into law a very simple principle that if you are born in America, you're in America. That America is not a country based on race. It's not a country that citizenship is only passed from a previous citizen, but it's a country of values. It's a country that people come here and they want to sign up and be part of the American dream. They want to fight for democratic values. They really want to support the Constitution. They really want an amazing opportunity to have a better life. And this Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association I was thinking about, why they were so important back in the 1890s, is because at that point, there were no Chinese American government officials. There weren't any in the legislature. There weren't any on the Board of Supervisors. The Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association was, frankly, the only quasi-government agency that Chinese Americans could come to get legal assistance, to get help with government, to get access into City Hall. And that was why this organization is absolutely so important. And you can see the important role they played in suing the federal government for Wong Kim Ark. And going back to what Dion was talking about, none of this would really be known without our Chinese Historical Society. Because what has been missing, we've been missing in history. If you look at our history books, if you look at what we all learn in U.S. history, you really don't hear about any contributions from Chinese Americans, even though Chinese Americans built the railroads. They were left out of that very controversial picture at the very end, with the 2 railroads meeting where not a single Chinese American was in that photo at Military Point. You see very few references about this case, even though it's very important in U.S. history. And you feel that our contributions as Americans are missing. And why is that so important? Is because then we get perceived as un-American. Based on the way we look, based on what they see in our face or perceive as perpetual forms. And this is why this case is so important, and I think what Doug echoed, which is that we are American, that we do belong here, that we are part of this more perfect union, and that it's not just Chinese Americans, it's all immigrants. And we all have faced a certain level of discrimination, faced a certain level of hate or prejudice as we come in and as our communities grow. But this organization in particular, CCBA, has always been there for our community, has always stood to fight for our community, and really was there at a time when there were no other places to go, where there really were no other people to help. And this is why it's also so important for me. I'm so honored to be a representative in the state legislature for San Francisco, but also for our Chinese American community. And it's a constant reminder that representation matters. It matters in the state assembly, it matters in city hall, it matters in our federal government. Because quite often, if you're not represented, then you end up having some adverse impacts. We saw what happened with the 1882 Exclusion Act. We saw what happened with Japanese American internment. And it's also, as the Deputy Consul General referenced, this is a very tenuous time for all of us who are Chinese Americans. Because we know that when relationships between between a foreign country and the US occur, which right now is with China, it really has a ripple effect with all Asian Americans. And we saw that with the Vietnam War. We saw that with World War II. So this, I know, is a little bit of history repeating ourselves itself. And I think David gave a quite excellent review of what that is all about. So for us, I'm really excited to see all of us here today. I'm really thankful for Dion for covering this on ABC, because it's so important that we teach our history, we remember our history. I think back to my college days. The only reason I knew this is I took Asian American Studies, and I learned about this in my Asian American Studies class. But there aren't that many Asian American Studies classes relative to the entire country or ethnic studies classes. So that's why what we talk about, that's why this history and this acknowledgement in history is absolutely so important. And that's why I'm really honored to be here today. We have two resolutions. So I present to Mel. Mel on behalf of the CCBA, and Justin on behalf of the Historical Society. Thomas. Is Thomas here? Thomas, you want to come up? On the resolution for CCBA, just acknowledging their contribution on this amazing case, as well as for the Historical Society to acknowledge their contribution, because it's so important not just to have fought the case, but then to teach it to our children and our grandchildren and all of our youth. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you.
Growing up and thinking if she can be on national television, perhaps one day I can as well. Now our next speaker is another civic and community leader, well known to everyone, City Attorney David Chu. He too has devoted his career to San Francisco and the Asian American community, and some of you may know that he previously served as Chinatown's District 3 member of the Board of Supervisors. He has a special guest with him, it looks like, starting them Yong. He's also, of course, he's one of San Francisco's members of the State Assembly. I can only imagine what people in the 1890s, what they thought of San Francisco's first city attorney and what this person must have gone through. And I wonder what they would think about seeing David serving in the position that he is in today. So please, everyone, welcome City Attorney David Chu.
Yosan, 大家好, 大家好. Good morning. Let me start by thanking the leadership of the Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association, the Chinese Historical Society, the descendants of the man that we celebrate today, all of you who have gathered as part of our community for this historic occasion. And let me also take a moment and just thank our sister who is helping to shed light on all this, Dion Lim. Thank you for everything you're doing for our community. Let's give it up for Dion. So a few days ago, I had promised my wife, who is working out of town today, that I would take care of my 7-year-old son. And I can assure you that my 7-year-old son, it's not his preference to go to community events on Saturday mornings. But I promised him 2 things. One, that I would only speak for 3.5 minutes. But secondly, that he would learn about a very important story. And there are 3 things that I want to convey to Lucas and to all of you today. The first is, today is a celebration of a true American hero. My guess is if you polled Americans, who is this man? Less than 0.1% of America would know the name Wong Kim Ark. We just celebrated an amazing Academy Awards ceremony where our Asian American brothers and sisters were acknowledged. And it is my hope that someday, if there's anyone from Hollywood here today, that someone will put a movie together about the story of Wong Kim Ark. And I will tell you where that story starts. As your city attorney, I want to tell you I do carry around a copy of the United States Constitution. And let me read from the 14th Amendment. Section 1. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. The story starts here in this Constitution, but it also starts with what we thought was the typical, archetypical story of this man. He came to San Francisco. He was the son of Chinese immigrants, but he was born here. He became a chef and decided one day that he would visit the country where his parents had come from, in China. And what happened when he came back? He was denied entry. He was detained by immigration officers who said, yeah, you were born here, but your parents were not, and thus you were not a United States citizen. Now, the next scene of the movie involves relatives of this organization, the great-grandparents of the leadership of the Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association. Because even Harrison Lim was not around in the 1880s. And I have to say, I did learn today from David Lay, I did not realize that this organization brought 10,000 lawsuits. And as someone who manages 4,000 lawsuits as your Chinese American city attorney, I feel like I'm a little behind. But thanks to the leadership of CCBA, thanks really to the courage of one man, this United States Supreme Court established a precedent that we benefit from today. And I would say for every single one of us who was born here in the United States, but does not look like the folks who came here in 1620, we might not be United States citizens, but for this decision. Now, the second reason this is so important, Lucas, is I wouldn't be standing here today but for the legacy of this man. When I was elected as the first Chinese American supervisor to represent Chinatown, I would often sit in San Francisco City Hall and look up in the ceiling that my friend Supervisor Joel Engardio looks up, the same ceiling that 125 years ago supervisors in San Francisco would look up as they were casting anti-Chinese votes in laws that had to get overturned. When Phil Ting and I served together in the California State Legislature, we would often talk about how we would walk the floor of those same state legislators who in the late 19th century passed the first version of the Anti-Chinese Exclusion Act. But I also tell you, we stand on the shoulders, as you have heard from others today, the shoulders of Yiguo, right? The story of a Chinese laundromat owner who dared suggest that he ought to be able to continue to operate his business, even though he had been arrested by a San Francisco duly elected sheriff. Or the story of Mamie Tate, who was an 8-year-old girl who dared suggest that she should go to Spring Valley Elementary School. These are the stories that need to be told in that future Academy Award-winning Hollywood film about Wong Kim Ark. The third and final lesson that I just want to share to all of you and to my son Lucas is that our work is not done. We know that we are in the third year of thousands of examples of anti-Asian hate. We also know that the lawsuits continue. It was just last year that I sent deputies to the United States Supreme Court to argue a case that would have denied social service programs to immigrants, to Chinese immigrants who had paid their taxes. We literally had to defend the right of our communities to receive our taxpayer dollars. We won, by the way, in Arizona versus City and County of San Francisco. Let me tell you about another case that my office is defending as we speak. So some of you may not know, for 150 years in our country's history, non-citizens were allowed to vote. Although let me be clear, it was white non-citizens from 1776 to the 1920s who were allowed to vote. Just so happens that San Francisco and other cities, we know this history, so we actually passed at the ballot box a charter amendment that decided years later for our immigrant parents to be able to vote in school board elections. Because at this moment, 1 out of 3 parents in our school system are immigrants. This is a right that our Chinese immigrant parents have actually enjoyed for the last 5 election cycles. But conservative, anti-Asian immigrant activists have come to our city to sue this very law. My deputies are defending that in court as we speak. I say this because while we are celebrating history today, we have to rededicate ourselves to the fight of our generation at this moment. And so as I close, let me just say, we're here to say that this struggle for our community continues. This is a struggle for justice, not just for Wong Kim Ark, but for us today, for my son's generation, and for our generations to come, 125 years from now. I want to thank you. Have a wonderful celebration. Thank you very much.
It is mind-blowing to know that these fights continue today. I'm not surprised, but all I have to say is, David, continue to fight, and to each and every one of you, continue to do so. And by the way, Lucas, I hope you have a good Saturday, the rest of your day. You're almost done. You got this, buddy. Now to someone who I've appreciated getting to know, because he is relatively new, Supervisor Joel Engardio, newly elected District 4 Supervisor who represents the Sunset. Now, the Sunset, as we know, has a very large Asian American population now, but many of you may not know that there were discriminatory practices when it comes to housing. And we saw that play out in our history. And it kept many people out for decades. Joel has worked very tirelessly on education and safety concerns. He has clearly made an impact in the Asian American community. Most recently, he worked on a house explosion case that many of you know about. And he instantly jumped into action, organizing a community meeting to make sure everyone was informed of what was available to them, resources-wise, to rebuild and to also stay in their district. He joins us now to present a proclamation from the Board of Supervisors. So, welcome, Joel.
Thank you, Dion. I want to say Dion Lim is a San Francisco hero. So we're here to talk about the hero Wong Kim Ark. And we've heard a lot about Wong Kim Ark today. And I want us to let's just take a moment. So everyone has this program. Let's look at the photo on the program. Let's just take a moment to see, what do you see when you look at the picture of Wong Kim Ark? I see a young man with hopes and dreams. I see a young man with courage and fortitude. And he certainly needed it, considering what he was up against. So imagine this. He's born here. He witnesses, his parents witness mobs of angry people, angry San Franciscans coming to Chinatown, terrorizing Chinese businesses. And his parents say, oh, this is not for me. And they leave, they go back to China. And he stays in that climate. But he goes back to visit his family, and on his return to San Francisco, he's denied entry. And so he uses this courage and fortitude and the help of the Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association to take his case all the way to the Supreme Court. I mean, imagine if you have a trouble today and you want to go to the Supreme Court. How daunting that is. Imagine what it was like in the 1890s, with everything stacked against him. So we have to really appreciate the courage and the fortitude that was born from his hopes and his dreams. And so we really need to carry that with us today, in remembering Wong Kim Ark, but also connecting him to our experience today. I wish I could meet him. He inspires me because we have a lot to fix in San Francisco. There's a lot of daunting things that we have in our lives today. And we can learn from that courage and fortitude that victory can be done. Freedom is fragile. There are no guarantees. We have to be vigilant. We have to always keep fighting for our freedoms. And this is a good example of that. And this gives me hope. So I hope we all leave today with a sense of hope for all the work that we need to do to make our city the best San Francisco, to make our country the best it can be. And it all starts with the courage and fortitude that we learn from Wong Kim Ark. And I want to present from the Board of Supervisors of City and County of San Francisco these two proclamations for the Chinese Historical Society of America and the Chinatown Consolidated Benevolent Association. Thank you very much.
So nice to see those proclamations and everyone spreading the word of those. And Joel, the allyship has been essential and crucial during this time of amplifying stories of Asian Americans, and for me the past several years. And I think for those in this room, seeing someone who does not look like that necessarily fighting on their behalf means more than you can probably imagine. Now, as expressed earlier, Wong Kim Ark's fight on behalf of Chinese Americans in the community could not have been made possible without lawyers. I had no idea so many lawsuits, by the way, were filed regularly. And there were no Asian American lawyers in California in Wong Kim Ark's time, but there are certainly now. So here to represent an organization that I have been a part of and volunteered my time with in other parts of the country as well, but I'm very glad to be alongside today from the Asian American Bar Association of the Greater Bay Area is John Lough, the association's Vice President and President-elect. Welcome to the stage right now, John Lough.
The beauty of being near the end of the program is all the great words already said. So what do I add to here? heard and making sure the story is heard. I welcome you to listen, invite you to learn from what is here and know what the mission is. These battles are still being fought now. So I leave with these two thoughts from today. Don't underestimate what a small, committed group of individuals can do. 2, the law can be an instrument of change. So I invite you to keep this fight going on. I also want to thank my friends. We were here for the centennial in 1998. Thank you, Julie, for leading that charge. Yeah. So, thank you, everyone. I look forward to hearing more from my friends.
You're right, it is best to be toward the end, because then you're also memorable that way, too. Something I think we all need to understand is that lawyers, yes, are important. But at the end of the day, we must all take into consideration the role of judges. Not because they ruled in a particular way, but because they also understand the people who come before them. They can apply important legal and constitutional principles to these cases. So I'm very pleased to present another respected community leader, retired San Francisco Superior Court Judge, Julie Tang.
Well, being one of the last to speak, I want to commend you for your stamina and being here. And I know you're the diehards who will listen. Thank you so much. But before do you mind, my choice is to either wear a mask or do some spraying here, so if you don't mind. And Dion, you're very courageous to, speak in, without using this. I would leave this for you. Our Chinese ancestors came to the United States in 1785. Before the Civil War, they endured tremendous hardship against racism, discrimination, and economic suppression from the white Americans. The case of U.S. versus Wong Kim Ark is a profile of courage against white superiority and oppression. Now, it's never been easy for Chinese in America, even to this day. So, talking about the litany of litigations, let's not forget, just even last Monday, some of us were at the San Francisco Board of Supervisors urging the board to issue a condemnation against a Texas bill that's currently going on that would prohibit immigrants, citizens from China, North Korea, Russia, and Iran to purchase land or real property in Texas. The folks in Texas, the community people opposing this law, is adamant, even after the change to allowing green card holders or dual citizenships to buy land in Texas, because the classification of any particular race or ethnicity or group of people is in and of itself illegal, unconstitutional, and violation of due process. It is also racist in intent, and we need to fight it. So I am joining the litany of all these litigations from our ancestors and continue on with this fight. But I want to share with you that this restrictive law that is being promulgated in Texas is now picking up steam in at least 11 states in the United States. And what is different though today's racist law, is because they are a product, as Phil Ting was saying, of the U.S. Cold War against China. And it is a consolidated effort to create and propagate the idea that China is a threat to the American people. She is not, and neither are Chinese people a threat to other Americans. Wong Kim Ark did a really good job when he pushed back. And as Supervisor said, Engardio said that it was not easy for him to do that against all odds. And even now, it is against all odds for us to do what we're doing, to fight back these ill-conceived policies that affect Chinese Americans. Because the example of Kim Ark really now encourages us to move towards peace and diplomacy. And I think this peace and diplomacy should extend even beyond our small circle and into geopolitics between the United States and China. I truly believe that Chinese Americans could not enjoy peace, safety, or prosperity in this country as long as the United States and China are not cooperating and not having a peaceful, mutually respectful relationship. And I hope that we can always work towards that and remind ourselves that Chinese Americans are not just a part of this country. We own this country too, all right, with our hard labor and our continuous effort and work to make this country better. We are innovative, we are educated, we donate to charity, to political leaders, and we vote. And we also know the law. So this is not just their land, it is our land too. So let's keep this in mind and fight for our rights and follow our historical ancestors' example, fight, fight, fight for justice. Thank you so much. I think we should acknowledge somebody here. Julie Sue, stand up. She is one who actually initiated this event 10 years ago, or 5 years ago. Thank you, Julie.
大家好，我係蘇榮麗，我爸爸係蘇迪芬，咁我想感謝大家嚟參加呢個1822年慶祝黃金德先生。So this is fourth generation Cantonese. 我爸爸從中國係讀學校畢業 so on the immigrant side is my father, but my family's been here since the late 1880s. And my Gongo was born here in 1892. So the Wong Kim Ark case has personal meaning, as Doug Chan said, because without the retroactive application, my family would not be U.S. citizens. And my Gongo co-founded the Chinese American Citizens Alliance in 1914-1915 to encourage civic engagement. So it's really important. 100 years, at the 100th anniversary, we had the late Harry Lough. We had my parents, John Trasvina's parents, and Nikki, his sister Nikki is here. So there are those who have left us, but Harry Lough was the first Chinese judge in San Francisco, and I feel like we need to acknowledge him. He was also on the Court of Appeal. He was my boss as insurance commissioner, and without someone like him breaking the pavement, we would not elevate. When I was part of the National Asian American Bar Association in the beginning, we had a membership of 10,000. We are now over 50,000, 60,000 strong today. And I see Portia Lee here. I want to acknowledge Portia Lee. Without our media partners here, and Portia's covered the court system, criminal, civil, as well as history. Without her bilingual reporting, we would not have this documented. And I thank the professors, Charles McLean, who wrote the Bible in the beginning of Chinese American history, his wife, Lorraine Wu McLean, whose father, Thomas Wu, a dentist, decided it was important to document this. So that's why we have a Chinese Historical Society. And I hope that all the professors here, Amanda Frost, who I met only online and finally got to meet her as she was working on her first book, but now the second book, it is a family here. G.D. Yong with the Bay Area Chinese genealogy group is here, and they helped save, as well as Frank Ma, who was working with Kevin Shelley. Kevin Shelley's father was a mayor, and he was only one of 3 state senators who voted against Japanese American internment. So it is about partnerships, it's about understanding our history. When I grew up, one paragraph about the railroads, and that was it. And so I didn't know about Wong Kim Ark. I went to law school here. I went to Lough High School, and it was John Trasvina calling from DC who said, we need to do something. So I failed the bar exam because, as John knows, it takes a lot of work as one person to put together this. I got to meet Yuk-Jin Wong, and so this is my appeal to you, and I don't want to be extra long-winded, but don't give a microphone to an attorney. But you need to study your own history, because sometimes our parents, our grandparents don't want to talk about history because they feel ashamed. It was not their fault that they were discriminated against. And my family was a victim of a hate crime. In 1901, my Gongo was left by his parents in the care of his uncle, and when he was 9 years old, his uncle was murdered by a white mob that went through Chinatown. So, but Sandra and Norman's father did not tell them about this history, and I was privileged to meet him several months after the 100th anniversary when Angel Island was dedicated as a National Historical Landmark. So I was privileged to tell Sandra what her father had told me, because, as Sandra said, she only learned about this history at her father's memorial service. So please visit the National Archives. I was also there, and BACGG members who form this now, and Jenny Liu and Jeannie Chewy Lough, we stood against the government wanting to shut down the National Archives. And so to this day, you can go and file a Freedom of Information request and get your ancestors' files. And by the way, they're called alien files. We are not from Mars, so we call them A files, being a little bit more polite. But please remember this history is important. The documentation is important. And Thomas Ng, I love you too, because anytime I'm in New York, I go to the CCBA at the New York chapter and pay my respects. And Eric Ng, your counterpart, says say hi to Harrison when you see him. So thank you so much for being here. Take a nugget with you. Think about some action that you're going to do to preserve this history, to extend this history. And we're still fighting the public schools right now. I'm working on bringing back 8th grade algebra. And you know, it still goes on, as people say. When I went to Lough High School, Chinese girls exclusively need to score higher to get into the school. Then it became all students. So we have a Lough alum who fought the case called Ho versus SFUSD. So look that up, where it was unfair to discriminate against one group in the name of diversity. So we can't have diversity, but look at the underlying population, and you know, we're good with numbers, so statistics can lie, but I was a double major in pure math and statistics at Cal. And I felt strongly enough to become an attorney and to keep on fighting on these issues. But one person makes a difference, and Sandra and Norman, you should be so proud. And their daughter, Nina, is here today, another generation of descendants to carry on this legacy.
At least one of us is good at math. I do have to say thank you for both of your words, unexpected as yours were. However, I think the courage, the boldness, that loud voice and conviction comes through, and seeing women especially be in this role, especially Asian American women, is such an inspiration even to someone like me today.
We love you.
Oh my God. Wow, I can't believe we finally made it toward the end of the program, and for a final word today is someone who has worked tirelessly in championing making today possible, and someone who's also been a champion of my storytelling, someone who has always said keep on going even in the face of adversity, and trust me, there has been a lot of it. 25 years ago, on behalf of the U.S. Department of Justice, John actually co-organized the centennial commemoration of the Wong Kim Ark decision. He has served in 2 other presidential administrations since then. He continues to educate, he continues to advocate on a breadth of issues. So it is my extreme pleasure to introduce you to John Trasvina.
Thank you so much, Dion, and really tremendous speakers today. And it's really your role here as part of history for the 125th anniversary of the Wong Kim Ark decision. I will just say one thing, and that is that Wong Kim Ark's victory was not just for people in this room, people who look like people in this room. I'm not Chinese American, but my uncle's citizenship. He was, my grandfather was representative of the Mexican government in San Francisco. My uncle was born here. His citizenship is due to Wong Kim Ark, and so many of the undocumented children of undocumented kids today, and many others, millions of others, owe their U.S. citizenship at birth, the security and the certainty of it, because of Wong Kim Ark. We've had a great program already. Really grateful to you, Dion, for your role here today and your role every day supporting, inspiring, educating, and informing everyone in the Bay Area. Thank you very much. We have gone on a good deal of time. We've got another panel coming up. We'll start again at 12:30. Please get some food and drink, and thank you all very much today.
Before we leave, John, thank you so much. You're the quarterback in this whole program. Let people know, okay? That's very important. Also, it's all about newspaper. When the newspaper is a community right. I want you to be Portia Lee. Portia, stand up, come here. Thank you so much. There's one person who
Consulate.